I think I'd like to start this discussion with a tangent. It's a relevant topic, but it's not the main topic. Generations are something that have confused me a little bit ever since I first heard of them. Like, I got splitting people into different cohorts based on age, but what I don't get is why those groups are so wide. Like, think about it this way. Take Gen Z, for example.
Then she can make my whole week. Peggy.
They span from 1997 to 2012, right? But if you put those two in a room together, one's gonna know what a GameCube is, and the other isn't. In fact, I'm pretty sure the other one wouldn't even know what a Wii U is. Yeah, no, 2012's probably been playing the Switch since 2017, when they were 5. Anyways, my point is, I think generations are far too wide to encompass a single group. At some point they might have been just wide enough, but they are too wide now. Either that, or I'm missing the point of lumping people into generations in the first place. I imagine it's more of a statistical tool than anything. Not really meant to be a concrete, determinant of how your life's gonna go. However, I think saying timing impacts what culture you're brought up in is kind of an obvious thing to say. What's more interesting to me is how time impacts relevance. My definition of quote-unquote culture being whatever's relevant in a particular moment of time. I understand that definition is ignoring geography and many other factors. I also understand that relevance is technically a subjective quality, but bear with me. So, I've split my conjecture into two parts, two models. The first model, the old model, is the model of interaction that I think has happened, how it appears to have occurred. My best guess. The second model, the new model, is how I am predicting things will go. How I'm hoping things will go. In fact, I'm predicting that it has already started and will continue. Under the old model, whatever was relevant was fairly segmented by decade. A few things may escape, but they are still marked by their existence in a prior decade. And as time goes on, and those times become less memory and more history, people have to perhaps anachronistically assign an identity to those decades. Pick the few things from those decades that stood out, and have them serve as markers. However, it seems like the 2000s were the last decade that I saw that happen for. In the 2010s, plenty of people, laughing about stuff that's stereotypically 2000s. However, in 1 or 2 years' time, we'll have reached the point where a lot of the inciting events of these times are a decade old. Surely, we won't loop back in on ourselves and do the same thing for those times, right? I'm not saying there isn't material, I'm just saying that it just doesn't seem like something that should happen. That's what the new model's about. Maybe it's an actual observation, maybe it's just wishful thinking. But I think I've noticed that we've been keeping slightly older media relevant through the layer of irony that we developed sometime around 2016 or 2017 that forms the basis of the current humor we have today. You know, like we still talk about games such as Halo Reach.
Yo, what did George do it?
As if no time has passed since their release. So I'm hoping that trend at least continues for a while. Though another part of me is certain that the cycle will repeat in 5 to 10 years. Maybe it's starting now. I'd like to elaborate on a detail about the new model, even if things don't play out as I think they will. We've still amassed a lot of what I'm going to call internet lore. You know, as a sort of history. Yeah, I think it's been long enough. I think you can start calling these videos history. I mean, next year you'll kind of have to. Anyways, for as long as this place has existed, we've been generating history. A history of content, people, events, and all somehow mostly contained within an abstraction, one separate from the real world. Look, at some point in the relatively near future, there's not going to be anyone left who knew of a world without the internet. We'll have known of its beginning, but we won't have known a world without it. Before the internet, the volume of content being published was magnitude smaller than what it is today. This has me wondering whether we can even comprehend a body of work that large, going through the same process that has been occurring for centuries and millennia to the classics. What will it mean for St. Andrews' Hunted by Morgan Freeman to be 100 years old?
I can smell you.
YouTube has the potential to be around by then, so I think it's a fair question. But just because YouTube will be around doesn't mean historically significant videos will be. I'm also afraid that YouTube's policies may have left some videos either altered from their original form or unwatchable completely. I know plenty of videos a long time ago used to use annotations heavily, and while there are extensions in some browsers to store those annotations, one, they're not in the same form, though they are better than having nothing at all. And two, not every user is going to install a browser extension just to get something that they didn't even know existed in the first place. And what about a platform more focused on short-form content? What about TikTok? You know, I've heard that platform's fairly big nowadays, but its content is almost designed to be temporary. Just videos you're meant to scroll past on your For You page. I guess what I'm getting at is that sometime around 2020 I realized that we're going to need a system for archiving videos significant to particular communities. Like a YouTube museum, if you will. Or maybe more accurately, the YouTube Library of Congress. I should probably admit the real reason why I'm bringing any of this up. I just can't stop wondering about how all of this is going to carry on. Or if it'll ever actually end like the previous generation of internet culture. Because around this time, 10 years ago, I remember all of the old stuff dying off. And proto-ironic content coming in to take its place. And I know that that content wasn't replaced. I can still access it today. But no one was making it anymore. Or if they were, it was evolving into a different form. You know, we see a lot less Gmod animations and a lot more SFM nowadays. And I learned to enjoy that content too. But at that point I was also still a child. So, there's some petty part of me that wonders if I'll be able to do the same thing again. For whatever's coming next. It wonders how much time I have until the new thing just ceases to... I just cease to care about it. Though, in that same breath, on a more meta level, it feels like nothing's really changed except the exterior since about 2017. So it's becoming more and more difficult to believe that any change could occur. Or if we're basing the timeline off last decade, that one's supposed to occur around about now. Or at least very, very soon. It's like a simultaneous feeling of dreading that we'll be stuck in the same place forever, but also that it is going to change very soon. A contradiction, I know.
Hey! You're Freeman, aren't you?
I wouldn't believe it if I couldn't see it with my own eyes. Dr. Gordon Freeman himself.
I think I know part of why all this feels off to me. I'd describe it sort of as a funhouse mirror effect. It's like I went from 2014 to 2024. And most of the things I like are intact. You know, the ones I care about anyways. But they're not as they were. So I'm just left here, looking into the funhouse mirror version of the past that we call the present. And I'm just sort of expected to believe that significant change has occurred. Logically, I know this. I can comprehend that new things have come out. I can logically comprehend that I've changed. It feels like I was riding a horse for 19 years. Distracted, taking in the scenery. But for whatever reason, I've fallen off, and now I can quantify just how far I've ridden. And the worst part is that the scenery hasn't even changed that much, when it feels like it should have. And yet it also feels if that wish were granted for me, it's going to occur sooner rather than later, and I'll have ran out of time to savor what I had before. You know, Tactical Intervention was a very interesting game. Sort of like Counter-Strike if it had been continued by one of the original creators, and also a little bit like Rainbow Six Siege. It was fun, and it was sad to see it go, but I didn't really get to play it for that long. It didn't really leave too much of an impact on me. But what about a game like Gary's Mod? The original mod's gonna be 20 this year, and I've sunk way too much time into the actual game that I'd care to talk about. How does a game like that carry on? I guess what I'm getting at is that I'm kind of on edge. I'm primed and waiting for the time when all of this goes away. When people, instead of playing Garry's Mod, choose the next big thing. And after that, when those who stuck around choose to leave. I'm awaiting the point in time when all of these things I've considered staples are no longer there. Pillars whose destruction would signal that the culture around me has definitely changed. That the foundation has shifted. That what I had been enjoying up until that point had concluded. And yet the fact that it hasn't happened yet is causing me much confusion. Maybe the fact that games are just generally lasting longer and being supported longer has something to do with it. It's giving me the impression that the 2020s are going to be the 2010s with a different coat of paint, which might be exactly what people in 2014 were thinking about the 2010s and the 2000s. Who knows? When do you reckon a memory becomes nostalgic? Does it depend on the subject matter? Is something like Vine nostalgic because it feels dated?
Man, right there. What the dog doing?
Was Half-Life nostalgic when Half-Life 2 came out? I haven't exactly been on top of most things in regards to the latest entertainment. It just wasn't usually available to me. You know, back in 2015, I would have just been getting around to playing Assassin's Creed 2. And I still haven't even gotten through Brotherhood of Revelations. You know, it's funny. I was far more willing to go out of my way to find things to do back then. I remember joining a Assassin's Creed-themed PvP and parkour group on Roblox. You know, back when both were something I played. You know, that group is the only reason I know that shift camera lock is a function in that game. Do you reckon I'm going to be sifting through all the games I still haven't played when I'm 40? Going through all the media I haven't experienced? Because I'm thinking I'm starting to realize that might be a losing battle. I think at some point I'm going to be forced to realize that I don't have enough time. Not enough to experience everything I want to. I've watched lots of channels over the years on this website. I've had access to it for way too long a time. A much longer time than I imagine a lot of people my age have had access to it. I remember a YouTube where you could customize your channel background to create an aesthetic for your page. You know, if you go on the Wayback Machine, you can see plenty of interesting designs. Kind of strange how that change only happened a decade ago. Well, 11 years ago, but I also remember YouTube before Google+. Hearing all the people complain about that is very funny in retrospect. So I had a brief 3-year window between 2009 and 2012. The most interesting thing I can remember right now is that I would have been watching old equals 3 content at that time, which is very funny, seeing as I would have been like 5 or 6. Other than that, I would have been getting shown all the source engine content that would be considered antique by today. My point is that I've been here for a while, on this site anyways. But it feels like sometime during that time I, looked away from those channels for 10 seconds. You know, went on to other channels. And now I've turned back. And what do I see? You know, Rooster Teeth's shutting down. And I didn't even get to see 1/10 of what they even did in the time that I was gone. And granted, I don't think their videos are gonna be deleted like Machinima did. Though, we were dealing with Warner Brothers then and we're dealing with Warner Brothers now. so knock on wood. It feels a bit like I've missed a moment with some of these channels. I just bring up Rooster Teeth because it's the most poignant in the moment. But there are plenty other examples of channels I've used to watch that I just sort of stopped watching at some point and never even checked in on. Or checked in infrequently. You know, the Yogscast is basically a TTT channel at this point. I found it interesting. Regardless, here we are. The present. 2024. Moving further and further away. It's like I've known this would happen as long as I've been alive. But I'm just now recognizing the implications. And it's killing me. Just a small thought compared to what we just went through. Somewhat related. A bit more of a belief than a thought. I think 2024 is going to wind up being a checkpoint year. You know, a year where you have access to all the old stuff that you knew, but also a year too far into the future to consider any of it particularly close anymore. A year where you know your brain's gonna create a boundary between everything before then and after then. I remember waking up January 1st, 2013, and claiming that we have made it to the future. It was most certainly because of the fact that we just survived our prophesized demise the prior day. But maybe in that moment, I also subconsciously knew that 2013 was going to be a checkpoint year. Just maybe. I want to ask you something. When does something become old? Anything. When does the adjective old get applied to it? Does it happen immediately after something comes into existence? Did Smash Ultimate become old the day after release? Probably not, but things don't stay eternally young. You know, is the Civil War a recent event? In reference from itself to today? What about for things that change over the course of their existence? Is Fortnite a new game? It's still relevant. Do we measure the age of TF2 from 2007 or 2017? Or maybe even 2023, if you count the summer update. Is applying the label of old to something as a conscious process or a subconscious process? Do we just sort of realize it one day? Are we more reluctant to do it as we realize that we ourselves are subject to the same judgment? When do you get old? At what point does the label of young no longer apply? I'd say I'm probably fairly young, but there are people younger than me. There are also people far older than me. So at what point will people from the outside, observing, no longer consider me as young? I guess it depends on who's observing.